The fluorescent lights of the briefing room hummed a flat, indifferent tune, casting a sterile, greenish pallor on the faces of the Marines. Anya Sharma stood near the back, a ghost in khaki pants and a navy blue contractor polo shirt, her presence acknowledged only by its initial dismissal. She held a ruggedized data pad, its screen dark, her posture relaxed but anchored. She was an observer, a civilian attachment meant to assess the readiness of Echo Company for their upcoming deployment. To the men in this room, she was a box to be checked, a bureaucratic necessity. Captain Marcus Thorne, commander of Echo Company, stood before a large digital map of the training area, a sprawling mock city in the heart of the desert known as Range 220. He was the archetype of a young, ambitious officer. Jaw set, voice loud, radiating a confidence that bordered on theatrical. He moved with a restless energy, his pointer stick tapping impatiently against the screen. "The scenario is simple, gentlemen," Thorne announced, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Intel reports a high-value target, Mongoose, is holed up in the marketplace. Grid coordinate 496732. We go in hard, we go in fast. Shock and awe. First platoon will establish the outer cordon here." He slashed a red line on the map, while second and third platoons conduct the primary assault. Questions? Silence. The junior officers and NCOs watched him, their expressions a mixture of practiced attention and fatigue. The impressionable ones, like Lieutenant Evans, mirrored Thorne's aggressive posture, leaning forward with feigned intensity. The older salts, the senior NCOs, were harder to read. Master Sergeant Cole Gunny Miller, the company's senior enlisted leader, stood off to the side, his arms crossed. His gaze wasn't on the map, but flickered around the room, assessing his Marines, his equipment, and, for a brief, calculating moment, Anya. Anya felt the glance but didn't react. She was cataloging her own observations. The frayed strap on a young Marine's pack, the slight flicker in the projector Thorne was using, the way the captain used the phrase shock and awe for a company-level action, a small but telling bit of rhetorical inflation. He was performing leadership, not embodying it. "Ma'am," Thorne's voice cut across the room, addressed to her without actually looking at her. "My men know what they're doing. Just keep your head down and your notes clean. We don't need any distractions." A few of the younger Marines snickered. Anya met Thorne's gaze for the first time. Her expression was neutral, her eyes calm. "Understood, Captain." Her voice was quiet, yet it carried a weight that made the humming of the lights seem to recede. She made no move to assert herself, offered no credentials beyond the simple ID badge clipped to her belt. The dismissal was expected. It was part of the process. Anonymity was a tool. Thorne turned back to his map, the moment forgotten. "All right, let's talk logistics." Anya let her focus drift, her senses expanding to encompass the room. The smell of old coffee, cleaning solvent, and the faint, dusty scent of the desert clinging to their uniforms. The rhythmic tap of Thorne's pointer. The subtle shift of weight from one foot to the other as a Marine fought off sleep. She wasn't just observing the plan. She was observing the system. The command climate was clear. Thorne was the sun, and his officers were planets held in his orbit by the gravity of his rank and ambition. Dissent was unlikely to be tolerated. Concerns would be suppressed. Metrics would be paramount. After the briefing, as the Marines filed out to begin their final preparations, Gunny Miller moved toward her, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He was a man carved from granite and experience, his face a roadmap of past deployments. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Anything you need, you let me know. Radio, water, a better vantage point." "I'm fine for now, Master Sergeant," Anya replied. "Just getting the lay of the land." Miller nodded, his eyes lingering on the datapad in her hand. "You've done this before, it wasn't a question." "A few times," she said, her answer deliberately vague. "This place, Range 220, Miller continued, his gaze shifting toward the door, through which the sounds of vehicle engines were beginning to rumble to life. "It has a way of stripping things down to the bone. The heat, the complexity. It finds the cracks. It was the closest he could come to voicing his concerns to a stranger, an outsider. Anya understood the subtext perfectly. He was worried about his Marines. He was worried about the plan. He was worried about his captain. "Cracks can be reinforced, Gunny," she said simply. A flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Stay safe out there, ma'am." He turned and walked away, his broad back disappearing into the harsh sunlight flooding the doorway. Anya remained in the cool of the briefing room for another minute, the silence now broken only by the hum of the electronics. She finally powered on her datapad. It wasn't for taking notes. A secure satellite link activated, and a series of encrypted icons appeared. She tapped one labeled BioSig, a biometric monitoring program she had access to. A list of names from Echo Company populated the screen, each with a small, pulsing green light next to it. It tracked their heart rate, core temperature, and stress levels via sensors embedded in their gear. It was an experimental system, and Thorne had argued against its use, calling it an invasion of his Marines' privacy. Higher command had insisted. She scrolled through the list. Most were stable, their heart rates slightly elevated with premission adrenaline. She found Thorne's name. His biometrics were a jagged line of high-frequency spikes. His resting heart rate was nearly 100 beats per minute. He was a kettle already at a rolling boil. She made a mental note. Calm under pressure was a resource, and Captain Thorne was burning through his before the first shot was even fired. She stepped outside, the desert heat hitting her like a physical blow. The air tasted of dust and diesel fumes. Echo Company was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Marines loading magazines, NCOs shouting final instructions, engines roaring. Anya found a spot near the command vehicle, a hulking MRAP bristling with antennas. She was close enough to monitor communications but far enough away to be invisible. She pulled on a simple pair of wraparound sunglasses and a tan boonie hat, blending into the background. Lieutenant Evans, Thorne's executive officer, jogged past her, then stopped, doing a double take. "You're coming with us? In the command vehicle?" "That's the arrangement, Lieutenant." Evans smirked. "Right. Well, try not to touch anything. The comm suite is a little sensitive." He jogged off, pleased with his small assertion of authority. Anya simply adjusted her hat, her gaze sweeping over the assembled force. She saw the details others missed. A vehicle's tire that was slightly underinflated. A young corporal whose hands trembled slightly as he chambered around. The way 1st Platoon's lieutenant seemed to avoid eye contact with Captain Thorne. Each was a small data point, an entry in a complex equation that was rapidly tilting toward a negative outcome. The pressure was building not from the simulated enemy in the mock city, but from within the fabric of the company itself. The cracks Gunny Miller had spoken of were already beginning to show. The convoy rolled out 20 minutes later, a line of armored snakes kicking up plumes of fine, pale dust. Anya sat in the back of the command MRAP, a headset over her ears, listening to the dispassionate chatter on the command net. The vehicle swayed and bounced over the uneven terrain, the interior a cramped space of metal, wires, and the tense silence of the comms technicians. Captain Thorne sat in the commander's seat up front, his voice a constant, sharp presence on the radio. "All call signs, this is Echo 6. Report readiness." The platoon leaders checked in, their voices tight with practiced radio discipline. "Echo 1. Ready. Echo 2. Ready. Echo 3. Ready." "Solid copy," Thorne said. "Increase speed. I want us on the objective 5 minutes ahead of schedule." "Push it." Anya glanced at her datapad. The biometrics for the driver spiked. The request was aggressive, pushing the vehicles near their operational limits on this kind of terrain. She looked out the thick, bulletproof window at the vehicle ahead, watching it fishtail slightly as it navigated a deep rut. Speed was a weapon, but it was a costly one. It burned fuel, stressed equipment, and frayed nerves. Thorne was spending it recklessly. They arrived at the edge of the training city, a collection of concrete and cinderblock buildings designed to mimic a dense urban environment. The place was eerily silent. The convoy halted, and the air filled with the hiss of hydraulics as ramps dropped. The Marines of 2nd and 3rd platoons dismounted, their forms dark against the bright, unforgiving sun. They moved with a practiced speed, fanning out to their assigned positions. 1st platoon, cordon is set. A voice crackled over the net. No movement observed. 2nd and 3rd platoons, you are green, Thorn commanded. I want that marketplace torn apart. Go! The 2 assault platoons began their push, moving down the dusty streets. Anya watched their progress on a digital map in the MRAP, their icons blinking as they advanced. She also watched their biometrics. Heart rates were high, a steady drumbeat of adrenaline. It was normal, but then she saw an anomaly. A cluster of readings in 2nd Platoon, 3rd Squad, were spiking erratically. Their stress indicators flashed from green to amber. Echo 6, this is Echo 2-3. A young voice, strained, came over the radio. We've got civilians in the objective building. Repeat, we have non-combatants. Anya's head snapped up. Civilians? They were role players, part of the exercise, but they weren't supposed to be in the target building itself. They were meant to clog the streets, to test the Marines' ability to de-escalate and control crowds. Thorn's voice was sharp, impatient. -2-3. Intel is solid. The building is sterile except for Mongoose and his security detail. Press the assault. 6, I have eyes on, sir. There are women, children. They look scared. They are role players trying to draw you out, Lieutenant, Thorn barked. Do not get distracted. Follow the plan. Breach the door. Anya looked at her datapad. The stress levels in 3rd Squad were now flashing red. The young lieutenant was being forced to choose between a direct order and the evidence of his own eyes. It was a classic leadership failure, a commander overriding the man on the ground from a position of ignorance. Sir, I don't think... The lieutenant started. Execute, Lieutenant. That is an order. Thorn's voice was a whip crack. There was a pause, a dead space on the radio that felt like an eternity. Then a muffled explosion, followed by the chatter of simulated gunfire. The icons for 3rd Squad swarmed into the building on the map. Anya felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Thorn hadn't adapted. He had forced reality to fit his plan. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the radio. Not the clean, crisp reports of the Marines' blank-firing adapters, but a deep, resonant hump. It was followed by a bright, searing flash of orange light that momentarily overwhelmed the MRAP's external cameras. What the hell was that? Thorn yelled. The radio exploded into a cacophony of panicked voices. Contact. Real-world explosion. Building 4 is on fire. We've got men down.
Irrapat. Actual casualties.
Medic. Medic. Anya's focus narrowed, the chaos in the MRAP fading into a low hum. She looked at her datapad. The biometric signals for 3 members of 3rd Squad had flatlined. 2 more were critical, their icons flashing a deep, urgent crimson. The exercise was over. This was real. The fire had been caused by the breach. The training city was old, and a faulty gas line in the wall, unmarked on any schematic, had been ignited by the explosive charge. The civilians inside were not role players. They were a team of maintenance workers who had entered the condemned building for emergency repairs, a fact lost in a bureaucratic shuffle and never relayed to exercise control. In the command vehicle, panic had taken root. The comms tech was frantically trying to get a clear signal, his hands shaking. Lieutenant Evans was staring at the screen, his face pale and slack with shock, and Captain Thorn was frozen. The architect of the shock and awe assault was paralyzed by its horrific, unintended consequences. He gripped his radio handset, but no words came out. His authority, built on a foundation of bluster, had crumbled to dust at the first touch of genuine crisis. Anya watched him for a single critical second. She saw the indecision, the fear. She saw a man utterly unequal to the moment. And then she moved. Her actions were fluid, economical, devoid of any wasted motion. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stood, and crossed the cramped space in 2 steps. She gently but firmly took the radio handset from the stunned comms tech. His fingers released it without resistance. "All stations, this is Observer Actual," she said, her voice cutting through the static-filled panic like a surgeon's scalpel. It was calm, level, and radiated an absolute, unshakable authority. "Cease exercise, cease exercise, cease exercise. We have a real-world mass casualty event at grid 49er6732. All call signs, acknowledge." One by one, the acknowledgements came back, the panic in the voices already receding, replaced by the focus that her calm tone demanded. "Echo 1, copy. Echo 2, copy. Echo 3, copy." Thorne finally broke from his stupor. He turned in his seat, his face a mask of fury and confusion. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he roared, scrambling out of his chair to confront her. "You are a civilian. You have no authority here. I am in command." He lunged toward her, his hand reaching for the radio handset, for the last vestige of his shattered control. "Give me that," he snarled, his face inches from hers. His fingers brushed her shoulder, his intent to physically shove her out of the way. "You know who I am." Anya didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. As his hand made contact, her body responded with an instinct honed over 1,000 hours of brutal, relentless training. Her left hand came up not to block but to guide, cupped his elbow, redirecting his momentum. Simultaneously, her right hand, still holding the radio, moved to his wrist. She applied pressure to a single nerve point. It wasn't a strike. It was a precise, surgical application of pain. Thorne's breath hitched. His eyes widened in shock as his entire arm went numb, his fingers uncurling involuntarily. Anya used his own forward momentum to turn him, stepping inside his center of gravity. A subtle trip behind his ankle, a gentle push on his chest, and he was falling. She controlled his descent, laying him on the deck of the MRAP with a dull thud, not a violent crash. It was over in less than 2 seconds. A flawless demonstration of control, not violence. He lay on his back, gasping, looking up at her with a mixture of pain, humiliation, and utter disbelief. The comms tech and Lieutenant Evans stared, their mouths agape. Anya looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "You are compromised, Captain," she said, her voice a quiet blade. "You are relieved. Stand down." She turned back to the radio, the incident already behind her, her mind processing the dozen critical tasks that needed to happen in the next 5 minutes. "Gunny Miller, Echo 6 Actual, do you copy?" she transmitted. There was a slight pause, and then the Master Sergeant's steady voice came back, with no trace of surprise. "Solid copy.
Observer Actual.
Send traffic." He had seamlessly accepted the transfer of command. He had been waiting for it. "Gunny, I need you to take charge on the ground. First platoon holds the outer cordon. Nothing in or out without my say-so. I need 3rd platoon to pull back and form a casualty collection point 200 meters east of the fire. I need 2nd platoon minus the trap squad to begin immediate fire suppression. Use every extinguisher you have. I want a head count of all personnel within 90 seconds. Go." "Copy all," Miller replied, his voice already galvanizing the Marines around him. "Executing." Anya's fingers flew across her datapad, pulling up schematics of the training area, overlaying thermal imagery from a drone she had requested from XCON moments before. "Echo 6 Actual to XCON," she said, her voice now patched through to the main exercise command center. A gruff voice answered, belonging to the exercise director, Colonel Matheson. "We're tracking the situation, Observer. What is your status?" "XCON, the on-scene commander is incapacitated. I have assumed tactical control," Anya stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I have 3 confirmed Kias, 2 critical casualties, and an unknown number of personnel trapped in a structure fire. I am declaring a real-world medical emergency." I need fire and rescue, and I need 2 medevac helicopters with full surgical teams on standby. The LZ will be at the casualty collection point. I'm sending you the coordinates now. There was a moment of stunned silence from the command center. A civilian contractor, an observer, had just taken command of a marine company in crisis, relieved its officer, and was now directing assets with the precision of a seasoned general. Observer. For the record, Colonel Matheson's voice was now tight, demanding, "Identify yourself. Who am I speaking to?" Before Anya could reply, another voice cut in on the XCON channel. It was a younger, sharper voice, one she recognized. It belonged to a Navy commander who served as the liaison from Joint Special Operations Command. "Colonel Matheson, stand by," the commander said urgently. "XCON. I'm cross-referencing the observer's embedded credentials. Her call sign is authorized for emergency override." A pause. The sound of furious typing. "Sir, that's not an observer. That's Scylla." The name hung in the air, an explosion of its own. Scylla. In the tight confines of the MRAP, Lieutenant Evans's head snapped toward Anya, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Captain Thorne, still on the floor, pushed himself up onto his elbows, his face ashen. The comms tech just stared, frozen. Colonel Matheson's voice came back over the net, and every trace of arrogance and impatience was gone, replaced by a deep, profound respect. "Scylla, you have the net. The birds are spinning up now. Whatever you need, you've got it. Report." Anya ignored the shockwaves her name had caused. She was already focused on the next problem. "XCON, I need the schematics for Building 4, specifically any information on utility lines or hazardous materials. The fire is spreading to the west wall." "Working on it, Scylla," the JSOC liaison replied instantly. "Gunny, what's your status?" Anya transmitted back to the company net. "Headcount complete." Miller's voice was a steady rock in the storm. "All personnel accounted for except 3rd Squad. We've got extinguishers on the blaze, but it's heavy, ma'am. We can't get close to the breach point." Anya studied the thermal feed from the drone. The heart of the fire was an intense white, but she saw a cooler, darker spot on the roof. A ventilation shaft. It was a long shot. "Gunny, is Sergeant Reyes with you?" she asked. Reyes was the company's master breacher. "Affirmative. I need him on the roof of the adjacent building, Building 6. Now. He needs to be prepared for a roof-level explosive breach on Building 4. We're going in from the top." It was a high-risk, unconventional solution. Breaching a burning, unstable building was something you trained for in simulators, but rarely, if ever, attempted in reality. But looking at the biometrics of the 2 critically injured Marines, their life signs fading, Anya knew they didn't have time to wait for the base fire department. "Copy," Miller said, without a flicker of hesitation. He trusted her judgment implicitly. For the next 20 minutes, Anya became the central node of a massive, synchronized effort. Her voice was a constant, calming presence on the radio, weaving together disparate elements into a single, cohesive rescue operation. She directed the placement of covering fire, not to suppress an enemy, but to blow out windows to help ventilate the smoke. She talked the company's corpsmen through advanced triage procedures for the burn victims, her medical knowledge as deep and precise as her tactical acumen. She coordinated the landing zone for the incoming helicopters, ensuring it was secure and prepped. Inside the MRAP, the atmosphere was surreal. Lieutenant Evans and the comms tech had become her willing assistants, relaying messages and monitoring systems at her direction, their earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet, focused awe. Captain Thorne had picked himself up off the floor and retreated to a corner of the vehicle. He sat silently, his head in his hands, a broken man forced to witness his own spectacular failure, while a quiet woman in a polo shirt did the job he was supposed to do. "Scylla, breach team is in position," Gunny Miller reported. "Medevac is 5 minutes out," the XCON liaison added. "Copy all," Anya said. She took a deep breath, her own heart rate a steady, controlled rhythm. "Gunny, on my mark. Execute breach in 3, 2, One mark. A muffled crump echoed across the training range. A cloud of dust and debris erupted from the roof of Building 4. Breach successful, Miller reported. We have a clean entry point. Rescue team is going in. Anya watched on the drone feed as dark figures rappelled through the newly created hole into the heart of the burning building. Her datapad showed the biometric signals of the rescue team, their heart rates hammering but their stress indicators holding steady. They were professionals, running on training and the calm, authoritative voice in their ears. The next few minutes stretched into an eternity. Anya's instructions were short, precise. Mind the floor joists on the west side. They're compromised. There's a secondary pocket of fire near the stairwell. Use foam. I need a status on the trapped men. Finally, Miller's voice, tight with strain and relief, came over the net. We have them. Two conscious, one unresponsive but breathing. We're bringing them up now. A wave of palpable relief washed through the MRAP. As the rescue team emerged from the smoke, carrying their wounded comrades, the first medevac helicopter, a Black Hawk with a red cross on its side, descended toward the landing zone, its rotors kicking up a storm of dust. Anya guided the final, critical steps, the careful transfer of the wounded, the reports to the incoming flight medics, the systematic withdrawal of the Marines from the danger zone. Only when the last helicopter was airborne, its sound fading into the desert sky, did she allow herself a moment. She leaned her head back against the cold steel wall of the MRAP, the radio finally falling silent. The immediate crisis was over. The aftermath was just beginning. Hours later, the sun had set, and the desert had grown cold. The burnt-out shell of Building 4 stood as a dark monument under a brilliant canopy of stars. The training exercise was suspended indefinitely. An investigation was already underway. Anya sat alone in the same sterile briefing room where it had all started. The humming of the fluorescent lights felt different now, less indifferent and more respectful. She was cleaning her equipment, not a weapon, but her datapad and headset. She wiped the fine layer of dust from the screen with a microfiber cloth, her movements methodical, practiced. It was a ritual, a way of decompressing, of boxing up the events of the day and filing them away. The door opened, and Gunny Miller walked in. He moved quietly, holding two steaming styrofoam cups. He placed one on the table in front of her without a word. The aroma of strong, black coffee filled the small space. He sat down across from her, cradling his own cup. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the soft click of Anya's fingers on her datapad as she began to type her after-action report. They're all going to make it, Miller finally said, his voice low. The two from 3rd Squad, the maintenance guys. All of them. Doc said another 10 minutes in that smoke, and it would have been a different story. Anya nodded, her eyes still on the screen. Good. Scylla, Miller said, testing the name. I've heard stories. Never thought I'd see it in person. He took a sip of his coffee. Heard you were a plank owner at DAM NEC with the new command. He was referring to the establishment of a new, highly specialized SEAL unit, a detail so classified it was practically a myth. Anya finally looked up from her screen. Her gaze was direct, but not unkind. There was no arrogance in her eyes, no satisfaction. Just a quiet, profound weariness. I was a chief, Gunny. Just like you, I had a job to do. Taking care of our people. That's all it ever is. Miller nodded slowly, a deep understanding passing between them. They were the same breed, separated only by the color of their uniforms. They were the ones who carried the weight. What happens to Thorne? He asked. That's not up to me, she said. He'll face a board. They'll read my report. They'll read yours. The system will work. Her voice was devoid of malice. Thorne wasn't an enemy to be defeated. He was a failure in the system, a component that had broken under stress. Another man appeared at the door. It was Colonel Matheson, the exercise director. He was holding his cover in his hands, a gesture of respect. He looked older than he had sounded on the radio. Ma'am, he said, his voice now quiet, humbled. He nodded at Miller. Gunny. He looked at Anya, his eyes searching her face. Your report will be the primary document in the investigation. I just wanted to thank you. You saved a lot of lives today. My career, that's one thing. But you saved my Marines. I was just doing my job, Colonel, she said, echoing her words to Miller. No, Matheson said, shaking his head. You did more than that. You showed us what right looks like. He hesitated for a moment. The Commandant's office has been trying to get you to come in to run the new asymmetric warfare curriculum at Quantico. Maybe after this, you'll consider it. Anya offered a small, non-committal smile. I'm a contractor now, sir. I go where the work is. Matheson nodded, understanding her polite deflection. He put his cover back on his head, his posture straightening. Well, if you ever change your mind, the door is always open. For Scylla, it's always open. He turned and left, leaving Anya and Miller alone again in the quiet hum of the room. Miller finished his coffee and stood up. I've got to check on my Marines, he paused at the door. Chief, it was an honor. Stay safe, Gunny, she replied. He left. Anya was alone once more. She took a sip of her own coffee, the warmth of small, grounding comfort in the vast, silent desert. She looked at the screen of her datapad, at the first line of her report. Incident. Range 220, Building 4. Real-world medical emergency. Units involved Echo Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. Initial observations. Command climate. Her fingers began to move across the screen, her words precise, objective, and unflinching. She would tell the truth as she always did. She would document the failures and the successes, the cracks and the reinforcements. She would do her job. And tomorrow, she would move on to the next assignment. A quiet, unassuming woman in a world of loud men. Her identity hidden in plain sight, ready for the next time things fell apart. The light from the datapad cast a soft blue glow on her face, the only illumination in the gathering darkness.